Story 1. I was pounding on a stranger's door in the middle of a raging blizzard, begging to be let in. He opened it. Then I heard footsteps overhead, in a single-story house where there was no second floor at all. I'd relocated to rural Montana around 6 years back, finally striking out on my own after my folks had nagged me endlessly about leaving the nest. It was my first real taste of independence, and I savored the solitude. I'm not the type to mingle much. Crowds drain me, so a remote spot suited me perfectly. The cabin I rented sat in one of the state's heaviest snow zones, isolated on a vast plot where the closest folks were a decent hike away. That isolation was a blessing. I thrived in it. The initial years passed quietly, just me heading to my job at a local warehouse, returning to unwind in peace, bothering no one, and expecting the same in return. I never bothered introducing myself to the neighbors. Why would I? Our places were scattered so far apart that days could slip by without spotting another human. It was ideal until that fateful day in late January. I was midway through my shift when the flakes began drifting down lazily. Nothing alarming at first, but soon the gusts whipped up fiercely, turning the world into a swirling void. Roads turned treacherous, and my supervisor wisely sent us packing before it worsened. My rugged SUV had tackled worse winters, so I figured I'd make it fine, though a few winding stretches on the route gnawed at my confidence. By the time I crunched into my driveway, exhaustion mingled with gratitude for being home. But as I fumbled with the key, the door refused to yield. Ice had sealed the lock tight. I paused, disbelief washing over me like the freezing wind. Jiggling it did nothing. I lacked any tool to melt the frost. Desperate, I exhaled hot breaths onto the metal, shielded it with my palms, even smacked it in irritation. Useless. Retreating to my vehicle, I cranked the heat, convincing myself the tempest would ease soon. Yet peering through the frosted glass, the snow intensified, burying my tires deeper. Minutes ticked by, and panic crept in. I was trapping myself. The SUV, once my escape, now felt like a coffin on wheels. No friends nearby to ring up. My family lived states away. A futile attempt to reverse out confirmed my fears. Stuck solid. Staying put overnight meant the fuel would dwindle, leaving me to freeze in this metal shell amid the howling gale. Swallowing my pride, I resolved to trek to a neighbor's, mortifying as it was to beg shelter from unknowns. The nearest dwelling loomed about half a mile off, each step a battle against the biting chill that clawed at my exposed skin. My teeth chattered violently by the time I arrived at the rundown bungalow, its faded siding barely visible through the onslaught. I pounded on the door with all my might, the sound muffled by the storm. After an eternity, it yanked open abruptly, startling me backward. The man inside appeared in his mid-50s with an unremarkable, weathered features that didn't invite warmth. He eyed me silently before muttering, his name was Frank. Stammering through my predicament, the frozen door, the immobilized car. He nodded absently and gestured me inside. Relief should have flooded me, but an inexplicable unease prickled my spine from the outset. The interior was toasty, chasing away the immediate numbness, yet something intangible felt amiss. He motioned to a sagging sofa, plopping into a threadbare recliner opposite. We exchanged awkward chit-chat, or rather, I attempted it while he responded in fragments, his gaze flitting erratically. From my face to the scuffed floorboards, up to the stained ceiling, then over his shoulder into shadows. It unnerved me. Was he anxious about an intruder in his space? Understandable, perhaps. But as minutes dragged, dread coiled tighter in my gut. Mid-conversation, he'd halt abruptly, fixating on a blank wall as if peering into another realm. My instincts screamed to minimize contact. Feigning fatigue, I requested to rest. He agreed almost eagerly, indicating the sofa for the night. When I suggested dousing the lights, he complied swiftly, but he lingered in the threshold, motionless and wordless, for an agonizing stretch. Pretending slumber, I slitted my eyes, heart pounding. Finally, he shuffled away down the dim corridor. Sleep evaded me despite bone-deep weariness. The couch cradled me comfortably, but paranoia gnawed relentlessly. Every creak amplified, jolting me awake, convinced of lurking threats. Then genuine noises emerge, thuds and scrapes from overhead. Rationalizing it as wind-tossed debris on the roof, I tensed. But these weren't random. They persisted, deliberate. This was a single-level home, no attic for footsteps. Staring upward, I wrestled with logic, pulse racing. The sounds ebbed and flowed, building to a deafening crash that propelled me upright, adrenaline surging. And there he was, Frank silhouetted in the doorway, watching in the gloom. How long? Terror iced my veins. Before I could speak, he lunged, vaulting the sofa and slamming me down. We grappled wildly on the rug. His grip sought my throat, surprising strength pinning me. Panic fueled my thrashing. He bellowed to cease struggling, ranting about her loneliness, how she'd appreciate my companionship. His words blurred in the frenzy. Survival instinct dominated. Wriggling free, I shoved him aside, snatched my jacket and bolted for the exit, barefoot in the snow. His deranged yell echoed, "She won't forgive this," spurring me onward to the next house. A kind couple, Elena and Mark, hauled me in without hesitation, their concerned faces a stark contrast to Frank's madness. I collapsed on their guest bed, sleep claiming me at last. Morning brought coffee and confessions around their oak table. Describing Frank's place, Mark cut in knowingly. It was him. He'd plagued the community for ages. Then, the chilling revelation. Years ago, Frank's partner vanished mysteriously. Whispers of foul play lingered, her remains undiscovered. Connections snapped into place, his ramblings about her, the eerie sounds. But I stayed mute, shock numbing my tongue. I filed a report with authorities, though doubt they pursued it vigorously. 3 years on, I remain in that cabin, uneventful days prevailing. Yet passing Frank's decrepit home stirs a primal itch, a reminder of buried horrors. The one upside? Bonding with Elena and Mark, though visits evoke that night's shadows, wondering what monstrosity festers in Frank's solitude. Story 2. A blizzard howled outside as someone hammered on my door. "Please, let me in. I'm freezing." I was about to open, then I noticed his boots, bone dry, spotless, like he'd never walked through snow. At 28, I reside solo in a modest cottage in remote Vermont, handling remote accounting gigs that keep me glued to screens, crunching numbers in pajamas. It's a low-key life. Weekdays rarely pull me outdoors, sometimes not at all. Last winter's epic nor'easter had been forecasted with apocalyptic flair. Warnings blared about historic accumulations, urging stockpiles and road avoidance. Skeptical of hype, I still hit the market early, loading up on provisions for a cozy lockdown. Snowflakes danced down by midday, escalating to a white maelstrom by dusk. Visibility vanished. Winds shrieked like tormented spirits, rattling windows. Curled on my armchair with a blanket, I flipped channels idly, the roar outside a constant companion. Around 10 p.m., a heavy thump resonated, trailed by a grating scrape, like furniture dragged over hard wood. Blaming nearby pines shedding branches under the weight, I shrugged it off. Minutes later, a feeble car horn pierced the din, sporadic, almost accidental. Peering from my bay window, hazy beams sliced the flurry near my lane's end. Squinting yielded nothing. No figures emerged. Likely a skid-off, common in these parts, but venturing out felt foolhardy. Retreating to warmth, guilt flickered briefly, but self-preservation won. By 11, pounding assaulted my entrance. Heart leaping, I approached cautiously, querying through the wood. A ragged male voice replied, "Vehicle stranded, needing warmth and a call." Breathless tone hinted at exposure's toll. Empathy tugged, yet wariness held firm. Midnight strangers in isolation screamed risk. Cracking the door with chain intact, I assessed snow-encrusted figure, compact build, trembling visibly. He pleaded his trek through darkness, dead battery his plight. Hesitating, my gaze dropped to his footwear, pristine, unscathed by slush. Impossible after any real slog, mine muddied from mere mailbox jaunts. Dread knotted my insides, unrelated to the chill seeping in. Politely refusing entry, I offered to summon aid. His insistence sharpened, but I sealed the barrier, bolting it tight. Muffled protests faded as I dialed emergency services, detailing the encounter. While on hold, footsteps crunched laterally toward my rear. Dispatcher urged lockdown, promising officers despite delays. From a shadowed pane, I spied him stationary at the corner, staring upward blankly. Unease morphed to terror as rear impacts commenced, furious, frame-quaking assaults. Knife in hand, I barricaded in my quarters, breath shallow, imagining breaches. The barrage ceased abruptly. Silence amplified my racing thoughts. Then, the horn blared unendingly, a distress siren. Relief surged with siren's approach. Cops discovered a ditched sedan farther along. Engine frigid, not recently operated. Eerily, no trails connected it to my yard. Prints circled my perimeter, but originated mid-drive, implying vehicular arrival. Search yielded no suspect. Dawn's light revealed muddy smears on my bedroom glass. Post-police, suggesting return or evasion. Days later, news of a nearby vacant home invasion surfaced. No thefts, just intrusion amid chaos. Motive? Unfathomable, unless harm intended. Shivers persist. That night, denial might have invited doom. Now storms evoke vigilance. Doors double-checked. Solitude's edge sharper. Story 3. Envision tumbling down a treacherous slope in a sudden avalanche. Your legs screaming in agony, the blizzard closing in like a predator. Only to be rescued by a shadowy figure who vanishes without a trace, leaving you questioning if salvation came from this world or beyond. Now 35, hailing from Alberta, my 20s revolved around pro snowboarding, hitting freestyle circuits intensely. 6 grueling seasons nationally before cumulative strains, aches from endless crashes, prompted retirement at 27. No regrets. It liberated me for passion pursuits, off-piste adventures in untamed wilderness, far from groomed runs. To clarify, I wasn't reckless. I held avalanche certs, first aid expertise, and adhered to solo protocols meticulously. Countless lone expeditions under my belt, 0 mishaps. That outing targeted a familiar ridge hours from base, scouted prior. Predictions promised mild flurries. Hazard checks greenlit it. Dawn arrival, skins on, ascent begun. En route, precipitation thickened. Winds veered unpredictably, slashing sightlines. Wisdom dictated retreat, but summit proximity tempted. One drop, then bail. Hindsight brands it idiotic. Pros perish, ignoring gut. Descent initiated smoothly cautious arcs. Midway, catastrophe. Snowpack fractured, engulfing me instantaneously. Not a spill, a forceful sweep. Control evaporated. Fortune favored. Minor slide. Tumbling yards before abrupt halt against unseen mass. Likely boulders. Dazed, agony exploded in my right ankle. Searing. Debilitating. Skis detached properly. One lost downslope. Attempting rise buckled me. Weight unbearable. Storm intensified. Flakes a blinding curtain, temps plummeting. Prospects grim, wait for improbable rescue. Sole confidant unaware till evening. Burrow inadequately equipped, or hobble onward despite torment. Motion chosen, stasis meant death. Improvising a crutch from my remaining pole, I limped, each advance a fiery ordeal. Focus narrowed. Endure, advance, survive amid worsening whiteout. Delirium loomed when rustles trailed me. Dismissing as hallucination, I pivoted. Another border materialized, descending fluidly. Emotion surged. Disbelief mingled with salvation's glow, undercut by primal fear. He neared, geared similarly, doffing helmet to query injury. Recounting the slide, he supported me instantly, arm over shoulder. Descent resumed, his aid easing burden. Dialogue sparse, pain dominated, yet his odd quip lingered. Haven't felt the earth under me in ages, feels grounding. Assumed slang, I chuckled weakly. Pausing against a fir, eyes shut briefly, mere moments. Reopening, solitude. Vanished utterly, no concealment possible. Calls echoed unanswered. Snow scrutiny, lone tracks mine. Panic swelled. Had trauma fabricated him? Tracks should have endured. Vertigo hit, reality fractured. No luxury for unraveling. Press on. Final stretch blurred. Agony, frostbite's nip. Sheer will. Vehicle reached, hospital bound. Twisted ankle, no fracture. Miraculous escape. Recovery bred obsession. That enigma. Origins, evaporation, absence of evidence. Forum dives unearthed horror. A recent fatality on that peak. Rider swallowed by squall. Body unfound. No visuals for comparison, yet parallels haunted. Rationalized as hypothermic mirage. Mind's crutch for isolation. But his tangible aid? Pace impossible solo? Boarding persists, never unaccompanied. What guided me? Mystery endures, gratitude laced with chills.